let's just start from the beginning here. Where are these kids, these other kids in 7th grade, where are they learning this stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they learn it from TV. I think they learn it from perhaps family. I don't know where they're getting it, but I do know that they're not being told not to say these things in our educational system. And it's concerning when these types of comments are allowed to sort of flourish and happen and take place. We spoke to one of the there was another student who'd made some homophobic comments, and we went to the school principal, to the school counselor, who said, all the kids are saying it, we just can't get them to stop. So the overarching problem here, and certainly I think my focus I want to make to be on anti-Semitism, is that combating anti-Semitism is something that is always given a second place at the table. It's never the first place at the table when it comes to these tolerance initiatives and education initiatives to teach us to quote unquote all get along. Somehow or another, Jews and anti-Semitism are never given a first place, and that's deeply problematic.
It's hard to argue with that, right? Especially considering what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. The Westport Public Schools categorically rejects anti-Semitism, has no tolerance for anti-Semitism or any other form of hate. This is their response. We address each issue and report head-on as they arise. Our response is done in a manner designed to help students feel safe and welcome in our schools. I don't think that happened to your son, but I guess my question would be, and you may have already alluded to that, if your son had been black or trans and had similar things said to him, would their response have been the same, you think?
So that's a dangerous place for me to guess, because if I were to make a guess and be wrong about it, I could get myself in trouble. But I can frame it by saying that I see time and time again in our school and in other schools that Jews are not given the first place at the table. I just wouldn't be able to say what would happen to one of those students, only because I don't have the firsthand experience. But what I can say is that if you extrapolate into the nation at large, we find the most incredible, forceful statements against bigotry, discrimination of any kind. And yet when it comes to Jews, suddenly these administrators have the most nuanced and clever ways to allow for this situation and that situation to happen. I mean, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but listening to these professors, testify on Capitol Hill, it was unbelievable, the sophisticated language that they used to allow for mistreatment of Jews to take place. And yet somehow or another, whether it's any other community that is oppressed, that deserves protection, they come out in force.
Right.
Why is that? This is something that really is concerning.
I just briefly, I want to take our viewers through what happened with your son. You all kept going to the administration. They kept doing nothing. Eventually, some lawyers got involved. They offered a settlement to pay for your son to go to private school, but demanded your silence in return. You couldn't talk about what had happened, the harassment, and the lack of response by the school itself. I'm interested, just before we go, how's your son doing with all this?
We had to take my son out of the school, because what happened was then the other parents in town started to hear about it, and we became a kind of a pariah. We got text messages that were very unfriendly that accused us of causing the problem, as if it was our fault that someone had said to my son, you should go to Camp Auschwitz, exterminate all of the Jews. The school administration not only tried to buy our silence, they tried to buy my son's silence. They actually said in their contract that my 12-year-old son would not be allowed to ever speak that any of this had happened. And in exchange, they would pay for 1 year, not even, it was a little more than a year of him to go to a Jewish day school 40 minutes away. I mean, it's such an unpleasant situation. We moved to this town thinking it would be warm and understanding and tolerant, and it really isn't. But again, I feel like I want to come back to this issue with the DEI initiatives. A lot of these DEI initiatives are very helpful and important, but somehow or another, the Jew and anti-Semitism is forgotten and ignored. You can just Google study after study after study shows how DEI is carving out a hole for the Jewish American experience, which is unfair, which allows for anti-Semitism. I'm not talking about disagreement with the Israeli government.
Yeah, no,
I'm talking about outright abuse of Jews. As a journalist, you may not know this, I made the film viral, Anti-Semitism and Four Mutations, which was on PBS. I'm the only journalist that was, as far as I know, was allowed inside the Tree of Life after the shooting, and I stood there staring at the bullet holes on the wall. I see this stuff, in my work for years and years and years firsthand. So when these things come to my son, it's ironic, but it's terrifying. If we're not drawing a line with anti-Semitism, the violence comes next. And that's a scary thought.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.